Hi, hello. My name is Michael Briant, and I directed episode one, The Way Back, of Blake 7, and it's still alive and kicking.
Welcome to Blake 7 The Way Back, a brand new podcast. I'm Philip.
I'm Dwayne.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Todd.
Each month we're going to analyse an episode of Blake's 7 episode, starting with the very first one in order. But as well as doing that, we also plan to talk to different creatives, directors, hopefully some writers, different cast members of the show, and talk about what was it like to make a show so long ago. We also plan to bring in some of the big fans of Blake 7 as well, and they're going to help us analyse the show, but also talk about the work they're doing. And we also want to look at some of the side spin-off things that happen with Blake 7. The videos, DVDs and Blu-rays, annuals, books, fiction and non-fiction, the Blake 7 magazine, and of course, audios. All the things that have kept fans engaged for a program that ended so long ago. But for today, it's just going to be the four of us, as we're going to introduce ourselves and also why we want to do this. And so, let's start with the first question. Dwayne, why are you doing this?
Well, that's easy, because you asked me, Philip, and I was happy to do that. So Blake 7 is a show that I know that you love, and it's got that close connection with Doctor Who as well. So fans of classic Doctor Who usually get into Blake 7 at some point. Unfortunately, I got into Blake 7, how many years ago is it now? Well over 30, 35 years ago, maybe longer, and have been enjoying it ever since. So happy to get on and talk about it with you.
Chris, why are you doing this?
Well, again, because you asked me, but also because I'm the complete opposite, and I had never watched it before. I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and I've been watching that since I was a kid. But and I'd heard of Blake 7, but I had never watched it. So I have now watched the first season at least, and I know what it's all about. Well, I don't know what it's all about, but I know things about it.
I remember Chris you and being utterly amazed by the fact that you knew nothing at all about the program, and the total lack of knowledge I found was astounding. Anyhow, we'll be discussing more of that along the way. And Todd, why are you going to do this?
Well, Philip, because you ask me, but also the other podcasts that I do for Doctor Who, Flight Through Entirety, a number of those fellows did a Blake 7 podcast, Maximum Power, and I was due to go on it an episode a season, but scheduling didn't sort of permit. And I think I was sick for the first one that I was going to do, so it never ended up happening. And I just didn't feel like I was an expert enough to go sort of, head to head with people every week, because I've only ever seen the series really once. Well, actually, I've seen it some episodes more than that. So I didn't feel like I was an expert. So as a classic series Doctor Who fan, and knowing the set 1970s Doctor Who like yourself and Dwayne, and being brought up here in Australia and getting Doctor Who, stripped 4 or 5 nights a week between 1978 and 83, and a lot of that being, the John Pertwee and the first 5 or 6 years of Tom Baker, which puts us between 1974 and 1979 in terms of what we were watching. I'm interested in seeing all the different creatives that are involved, from the writers to the directors, to the designers and seeing what the crossover is between Blake 7 and Doctor Who, and especially all the different guest stars as well.
Well, I mean, Todd, I particularly wanted you to join us because I just love how you analyse things and the way that you think through stuff. So the stuff when you talk to Doctor Who, I've always enjoyed how you get out so many different things I haven't seen before, and that's why I wanted you on here. Chris, I'm wanting you here because your total lack of knowledge is going to be refreshing, and because I'm hoping many people will join us who haven't watched the show at all either, and so you'll be giving a perspective in terms of coming to it fresh from 2025 at the moment. And Dwayne, I just love spending time with you, so that's why you're here. So I'm really looking forward to us going through this journey, and I'm looking to mix it up with other people coming along the way as well. So what I ask you all is, what is your earliest memory of Blake's 7? Who wants to go first? Dwayne, why would you go in the same order?
Well, I was pondering this because I knew you were going to ask the question, and I'm now not 100% sure because I had a friend back in the late 80s, early 90s who had recorded a lot of Doctor Who off the television. I was borrowing his Doctor Who tapes and copying them and whatnot, but he also had Blake 7, Series C, or 3. I'll call it Series 3, and really annoy the purists. And so that was, I feel like that was my first full season that I watched through. And then I think I would have gone to a video store and they had all the Blake 7 omnibus editions in their beta section, because I was a beta cassette man. And so I started off with the beginning, of course, which was a compilation of the first 4 episodes, the heavily edited episode 1, The Way Back, and absolutely loved it. And so I think the next one after that was Seek, Locate, Destroy, then Jewel was the next compilation, and then it went to a combination of Aurak. I think Aurak was the next one, and then it was like Aurak and the first episode of season 3 compiled into one VHS. So that's my earliest memory of seeing that first couple of series for the first time in that form, plus the off-air recordings of Series C, which I really enjoyed too. So I've got a real affection for Series C actually, because I feel like that's my first full season. But yeah, and then getting into the whole lot, Series 4, I took ages for me to see that. I can't remember when I saw that for the first time. It would have been years and years later. But yeah, very, very excited to see that. But yeah, thrilled by all the similarities to Doctor Who, the production values, the guest artists that were coming on, that were crossing over between series as well. So, you know, that was thrilling to watch.
Yeah, certainly one of the things we'll talk about, I mean, Dwayne's already brought up, part is what we call it all, A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. The actual proper production, always called it A, B, C, and D. But when the DVD started coming out, they started losing Season 1, Season 2, and the Blu-ray used Season 1 as well. Though I suspect, I'm a bit of a purist, so I think I'll be using Series A, B, C, and D in that way. But just so you know, it's either A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. You can work it out. We'll probably go backwards and forwards. Chris, when did you first discover Blake 7 and watch the first episode?
Well, I have known about the show, so I do remember probably late 80s or early 90s. They'd mention it a lot in Doctor Who magazine, and I was like, what is this Blake 7 show? I've never heard of it. Who is Blake? Why is his name Blake 7 for one thing? And I do remember seeing a picture of the actor that plays Avon, and forgive me, but I am terrible with names, so I
Paul Darrow.
Yep, I remember seeing a picture of him from Time Lash, and I hadn't seen Time Lash at that stage. I'd probably read the book, but I hadn't seen Time Lash, and they mentioned that he had played Avon, and his character was similar to Avon in Blake 7. I remember that clearly. So I've always thought that Avon was going to be a bad guy in Blake 7. I've always thought that he was just one of the baddies, just from that little blurb in Doctor Who magazine.
Having watched Season 1, do you think he still is the baddie or not?
Not now, no. Now I realise that I've misunderstood what they were saying, and he wasn't the bad guy. But I get, yeah, it's same temperament as the characters had, so I get that now. And I think I do remember seeing video VHSs at the ABC store next to Doctor Who, but I was never tempted to get it because I just wanted the Doctor Who VHSs because I'd never seen those episodes. So that's my link of Blake 7, yeah.
Well, I've got a story to tell you. So my memory cheats. Like, I know that in watching Doctor Who here in Australia, you know, when I was about 8 to 10 years old on the ABC, I knew that at some point between 1978 and 83, there were repeats of Blake 7, because I remember a very grey ship, and I remember seats in a row, and I remember one of the crew had long blonde hair. And at some point I realised that Michael Keating, who plays Villa, was in the Sunmakers for Doctor Who, and vice versa. So that's sort of my earliest kind of memory from the early 80s. Jump forward about 10 years to when Doctor Who finished, and I got into Doctor Who fandom, and I met people who I podcast with, Nathan and Peter from Flight Through Entirety, and Simon and Kate Orman, and we all would get together and we'd watch Doctor Who, and we'd watch Star Trek The Next Generation because that was new out. But we also watched episodes of Blake 7 because they were into it. So I watched various episodes completely out of order, out of context in the early 90s. And also at that time, Peter and Simon were doing a communications degree. And so they had access to editing equipment. So they put together these joke tapes called in-jokes, which I guess are sort of like doing like memes, really, of Doctor Who and Blake 7, and they interspliced all this funny stuff in short sort of clips. And so this is obviously pre-internet, pre-DVD, pre what we can do on our phones. And so I have these recollections of just strange things like eat the food, Og, eat the food, and other moments in Blake 7 that I have absolutely no context for. So fast forward another 10 years to when the DVDs came out, in the early 2000s, and I bought them and I watched them, and then suddenly things would just pop up where I'd be going, okay, I know this sequence, or it would just be, oh my goodness, this is something that I've seen 30 seconds of 10 years ago. So they're my memories of Blake 7. I've seen obviously the show all the way through, but I don't know it like yourself or Dwayne, even talking about those names of those episodes. Like with Doctor Who of those that 70s time, I can recall the writers and the directors and who was guest starring, but I don't know that for Blake 7. Some episodes I've seen once. There's a number of episodes I've seen twice, and there's a handful that I've seen 3 times, but I just don't know it to that sort of extent. So that's my history with Blake 7 and my memories of things. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what I do remember, seeing where these sort of in-jokes come up, in what episodes, and deepening my understanding of the show.
Brilliant. Looking forward to it. So a bit about the origin of Blake 7. The show began because of just one man, Terry Nation. It was his vision and his dream, and almost 50 years ago to the day, he went to the BBC to pitch an idea, a glossy thriller called Dan Fogg. This was a show about a former cop and a lawyer who was the head of criminology at Oxford University. The head of series, Ronnie Marsh, thought the idea was garbage and rejected it straight away, but said to Terry Nation, any other ideas? And off the top of his head, Terry Nation came up with this idea, and these are the notes that Ronnie Marsh wrote.
Cracking boys' own kidult sci-fi, a space western adventure, a modern swashbuckler, Blake 7, a group of villains being escorted onto a rocket ship, transported, which goes astray and lands on alien planet where inhabitants are planning to invade and destroy Earth, possibly live underground.
So based on that, Terry Nation was given £950 and told to go and write the pilot.
That was it.
That was it. That was the blurb he gave, and based on that, the BBC said, let's go for it.
Oh my goodness, I don't know whether I would have done that if I'd been in charge.
Tell us a bit about Terry Nation, Todd.
Well, Terry Nation was born in 1930, And he actually had quite an extensive writing career throughout the 60s. He started in comedy, but then he wrote quite a lot of episodes of television that were sort of action adventure. The Avengers, he did 6 episodes of The Avengers. The Baron, I think he did 17 episodes. The Champions, a couple of episodes. The Persuaders, The Saint, 14 episodes. So he actually wrote a hell of a lot of these sort of James Bond-esque style shows throughout the 1960s. And of course, he created the Daleks for Doctor Who, and that's probably up to this point what he was best known for. And I mean, we're all Doctor Who fans, so we all know, Terry Nation's writing from Doctor Who, and it was very creative at times, and at other times throughout the run of the show, I think we say it's Terry Nation tropes have been pulled out of the bag. But, initially his ideas were, I mean, I think you guys would agree with me, like, what is on the small screen in his various Doctor Who episodes, you sort of see later on in a lot of action movies, from Hollywood and that sort of thing. So, he actually had he had the ability to write and write a lot of similar sort of genre stuff. He created a show called The Survivors in 1975, and that ran for 3 seasons, although he had a falling out with the producer, Terence Dudley, after the first season, so he wasn't involved with the rest of that. So he comes into, obviously at this point, Blake 7, that he's 45, around 45, 46 years old, as he's pitching this, which sort of, I think, sort of echoes a bit like, the revival of Doctor Who with Russell T Davies being in his mid-40s. It seems to be a point where people are ready to step up and, be showrunners or be creatives, and yes, that's my bit about Terry Nation.
I'm going to ask everyone's recollections about him in a moment. I think part of The Survivors, 'cause with people who have watched The Survivors, I only came to it very late. Actually, I came to The Survivors through Big Finish. Then I started listening to the Big Finish CDs and got blown away by how terrifying and excellent they were. I went back to watch the whole series. And in that first series, I think it's 12 or 13 episodes again, Terry Nation wrote 9 of the 12 or 13. So once again, the vast bulk of them he wrote. Terence Dudley, of course, has a Doctor Who connection. What's Terence Dudley's Doctor Who connection?
Order Doomsday and Black Orchid.
And K9 and Company.
And Ken and Company. Well, that was a good one, wasn't it?
Sorry, I forgot about that.
So Terry Nation got sort of fired from his own program, but he kept being paid £200 per episode after that. But also his reputation was such across the sea because of all these glossy stuff he'd done. He was well known in America as well, and he had tried to build his career in America with the Daleks, which is why the Daleks disappeared from Doctor Who for a while he went to the trying to sell the Daleks and sell other things in America, which didn't work out. But the BBC thought this was a guy who could get co-production with America.
Well, later on, he did go to America and he did write a few episodes of a few genre shows over there. I can't remember. Actually, I don't have it in front of me what he actually wrote, but I know that he did write a few episodes of things in the mid-'80s. But you were going to say, what do people think of Terry's writing in Doctor Who? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Well, I knew that Terry had been involved with Tony Hancock. It was mentioned he was in comedy in the 1950s, so I was a huge fan of radio shows like The Goon Show, and Hancock was another one of those silly comedy shows that I really loved as a kid. The ABC used to repeat them a lot, so I got into those shows that way. And I don't think he wrote too much for the radio series. He may have written a bit for the TV series. I'm not sure how much he did write, but it's interesting that he wrote for the Avengers, because even though that was, I think he mainly wrote for Series 6, I think. I don't recall seeing his name much before that. And that was quite silly adventure. So he was sort of crossing over from the comedy into the silly but adventure at the same time, and then going into the pure sci-fi adventure with Doctor Who as well. So even though, I mean, the Avengers came after his Doctor Who's, so he was quite versatile in being able to do that comedy and adventure drama as well.
I think, Dwayne, you're right. Like, I mean, if you look at his Doctor Who's, there is humour. There are characters. There are situations where of peril, and all of those things occur in all of those 1960s sort of spy shows as well. So he certainly cut his teeth not only on Doctor Who, but in all of that. So coming into Blake 7, he's got that huge array of experience to pull from in terms of creating drama, creating action, creating comedy moments, creating all sorts of different characters, and creating people with interesting names. I think that's one of the things from Doctor Who, where you have, like, you know, Lartep and all sorts of funny names for space people. We've got them all here too.
Well, I did notice that in the show, actually, the names. I was going to ask you about the names at one point. Is there any reason why they don't, like, some people they use their surnames, some people they use their first names? It just seems a bit odd. Is there any reason for that? I haven't seen it explained, or I couldn't figure it out.
We can discuss it along the way. There'll be lots of stuff to talk about along the way. Hey, we have how many episodes? 52 months to get through this.
Okay.
We have something. We did keep some stuff to talk about along the way. But interesting how many. I mean, just on names, how much he uses the same names from Doctor Who into Blake 7 and back, and vice versa. Tarrant is a name he really likes, and we'll discuss why maybe he likes that name a bit later as well. Any other comments, Dwayne?
No, I do. I've never been a huge fan of his Third Doctor Dalek stories. I do like his non-Dalek stories. When he has the opportunity to get away from the Daleks for a bit. I mean, the android invasion's not the most popular of stories, but I like it. I like what it's trying to do, and I really love the Keys of Marinus. I love that quest style story that takes you all over this one of the weirdest planets in the whole universe, I think. So he did a great job on that, I think.
Dwayne, I have to agree with you. Like, I mean, I really love the Keys of Marinus, and I really like the android invasion too. It shows what Terry can do without the Daleks. And some Dalek stuff he does really well. Like the first few Dalek stories are really inventive. And then you have other thing later on, Genesis of the Daleks, introducing Davros again. I mean, I really love Death to the Daleks, but that is very stock cliche. But it's still got interesting things in there with, you know, alien creatures and cities that attack you and things like that, which I'm sure we'll get into when we watch more of Blake 7, you know?
I picked up on that too, yeah. And I like those stories as well. The android invasion is one of my favourites. I really like that story a lot. And the Keys of Marinus, I remember reading that as a kid. And I thought that was a really exciting book too, very different, like you said, with the different worlds, and it was a quest style story as well. So that was actually one of a favourite I remember clearly reading as a kid.
He certainly is great with world building. The reason why Terence Dudley didn't want to work with him in season 2 and season 3 of Survivors was he felt that Terence was all about action and not about character, and he really wanted to take the show to a character-driven place rather than the action and political place that Terry Nation had taken it to it. And so we got 2 seasons of lots of people farming. So I think season 1 works far better than season 2 and 3.
and then, of course, Terence went on to do a lot, be very involved with All Creatures Great and Small. So it was probably preparing him for that.
So I'm sure we'll have a lot more to say about Terry Nation as we go. In fact, I know we will. For now, though, I'm just going to throw to Michael E. Briant. Dwayne and I had a conversation with him just recently. And one of the first thing we asked was, how did he come to direct Blake 7?
I'd moved on from Doctor Who, and I think I was doing Warship, which I absolutely adored doing. And David called me and said, I'd like you to do, would you be interested in doing this new sci-fi series, Blake 7, to which I said no. Actually, David, I really wouldn't. I've done my time on Doctor Who. I've made a conscious. I learnt my trade on Doctor Who. Loved doing it. Great fun. But I really want to go on to do other things other than a sci-fi show. It's not for me, but thank you very much. And David went, yeah, Michael, no, this is something else. This is entirely different. And David said, look, he said, let me take you to dinner and let me show you episode 1. I said, okay. So he took me there and he told me about what the series was, how it was totally different. It was adult science fiction. It was nothing like Doctor Who whatsoever. It was a whole new concept. It was a whole new idea. And here is episode 1 called The Way Back. Have a little read of that. And I read it and went, hey, this really is actually very good. And this is Terry Nation at its absolute best. It is nothing like I imagined. It is so different. And David said, so, will you just do episode 1 and a couple of other episodes for me? And I said, yeah, fine. I'll do episode 1 and a couple. He said, you can do more if you want. I went, no, that's fine, thank you. I did it really on the basis of the synopsis and a few pages of episode 1. I did the job and was thrilled when I walked into the office and actually got the first complete script of episode 1. I was delighted. I thought it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
You were commissioned in May 1977 along with Lenny Mayne and Pennant Roberts to direct the first block of Blake 7. Did the three of you get together with David Maloney to discuss sets and actors? Who made decisions about casting and those kind of things?
Sadly, Lenny had. I never met Lenny. I knew him by reputation. He's also a sailor. He was also a sailor. But I never met Lenny. I don't think Lenny even got to start on the production. It ended up being Pennant Roberts, me, and David would spend an awful lot of time, sitting there just talking about how we saw the show, how we thought things would happen, doing the casting. The casting was a sort of the three of us, although very much David's lead. Very much David Maloney took the lead in it. But Pennant, David, and I did most of it. Veer came in later to replace Lenny, I think was the way. Veer Lorimer came in later to replace Lenny. The three of us discussed the casting of the show, although David had originally cast Gareth as Blake before I sat down, which is the expression for being legally on the production, being paid to be there by the BBC, to be sitting in the office making it. So by the time I sat down and walked in, and Pennant joined about the same time, a little bit later because he was doing the second show, so his contract would have started a few weeks later than mine. We sat down and the three of us would just sit down and talk about it. We just talked about the way we saw it. I actually saw the show, I actually saw the spacecraft somewhat differently from David and Pennant, in as much as I saw it not so much as levers and dials and controls, and I thought that it should be somewhere where you could look with your eyes at screens and make things happen, and you could say to the screen and make things happen, rather than push a lever or press a button. That was my concept. David and Pennant and Chris Boucher, the story editor, who frankly wrote most of Blake 7, Series 1, brilliant man, didn't see it that way. although David very generously, I saw in an interview a while later, said eventually it came round to my concept because they started having Zen and it started being computer driven. And my original concept was you would have a place you stood where you interacted with the computer, which was my concept. And it ended up with Zen being on the wall and you interacted. So David very generously said, yeah, we sort of came around to Michael's original concept, but it took a few episodes to get there. So yeah, I mean, the 3-4 of us, including Chris Boucher, came up with how we thought the show would be, how we thought it would be stylized, and how we thought it could be done in the studio. The concept of the spaceship itself, the designer Roger Murray and David were very, very involved together in the designing of the ship, because they decided to go with Roger's concept of the spaceship rather than the visual effects concept. Visual effects guys were used to working on shows which were not particularly involved with actors and not particularly involved with directors. I think they had this concept that everything revolved around visual effects, whereas I think drama directors, think everything revolves around the actors and the way the director sees it. So there was some problems between directors and vis effects department. So anyway, Robert Murray Leach went along with David went along with Robert Murray Leach's concept for the spaceship, which was a great concept, and Roger then created this main set interior, which in a way was quite an economic. I mean, scenery is very, very expensive. So the fewer new sets you have every week, the cheaper the production is going to be, or the more economical the production is going to be. So Roger designed this main spaceship, which occupied half the studio. And with the exception of my episode 1, every single week that goddamn set was in the studio, sitting there, occupying half the space. And that was very much Roger and David's concept of what it should be.
Did you have much to do with Terry Nation at the beginning? Was he involved in the sit down at the start at all, or he was just basically the concept?
Back in those days, directors almost never ever met the writer, and they were certainly not allowed to communicate with the writer. It all had to be done through the story editor. So in the entire time I did jobs at the BBC, the very first writer I ever encountered was Arden Winch, because Jerry Glaister trusted me, and that was on Blood Money, and Jerry put me and the writer together. But generally speaking, directors, and certainly on Blake 7, never met or communicated in any way, shape or form with the writer. It all went through the story editor. So if as a director you had comments about the script, like you wrote this load of cobblers, that was directed at the story editor, who then said he really loves your script. Could you...
He was the diplomat.
Yeah, yes, and also knew, because don't forget, the producer and the script editor had spent a lot of time working with the writer, preparing the script long before the director came on board. So there was a good historical reason. Also, directors and actors would sometimes get carried away with rewriting in the rehearsal room because they thought they knew how to make the dialogue better or more sayable. And that got, around the Blake 7 time, that got heavily stamped on. Around the Doctor Who time, Tom Baker, John Pertwee, Doctor Who time, that got heavily stamped on. So any changes that were made to the dialogue, to the script, had to go, at the end of the day, one of the ASM's job was to tell was to pick up the phone to the story editor and say, they want to change this to, blah, 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 to nix, nix, nix. Is that okay? And there would be, the story editor would make a decision, maybe with a producer or writer, or just himself, and then come back and okay it or not okay it sometimes. But no, I've never met Terry Nation, never had any communication with him whatsoever. And I'm pretty sure the same would have applied to Pennant and to Veer. Oh no, Veer, well, as a producer, Veer.
So Terry Nation was being paid £1,200 a script. Does that mean he was the highest paid person in Blake 7?
I suspect Terry Nation ended up receiving more money than everybody else out of Blake 7, because apart from anything else, he would have had the creator's fee, which he would have got whether he wrote the episode or not. So X amount of money would come to him for creating it. He also had the contract to write, I think, the first series. Was the first series 13 episodes?
He wrote all 13 episodes of the first series.
Yeah. He wrote the first 13 episodes. So, that's a fair load of old money. And in fact, what he did for that was write, in many cases, he just wrote a synopsis, virtually. I am told, or that's what I hear. He just really wrote a synopsis, and Chris Boucher sat down and pounded the ivories and made it into scripts.
Well, thanks very much, Michael. It was so great to have you on the program, and we look forward to talking to you again next time. So he'll be talking about the first episode, The Way Back. That's a bit of background about Blake 7. Next time we will be looking at The Way Back. So if you've never actually watched Blake 7 before, can we encourage you? Grab the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray looks amazing. Or get any copy you can get. Watch The Way Back. We will be talking to Chris from the past, where he's going to watch the episode for the first time. We'll also have Michael E. Briant also on the program discussing directing The Way Back and some of the things he did as well. And we'll be doing a bit of analysis of the Way Back. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me, and goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you, Philip.
I'll see you later. Have a good night.
See you soon.
Thanks for joining us on Blake 7, The Way Back, starring Todd Bilby, Chris Beer, Dwayne Bunny, Philip Edney, and special guest Michael Briant. Original theme by Joe Kramer. This episode, the confusingly numbered 0, The Beginning, was released in August 2025. It was recorded on the lands of the Wallumbegall, Wurundjeri, Kamalakalaka, and Jurag nations, also known as Sydney, Melbourne, and Tasmania. And for those of you good with geography, Tasmania is a state in Australia rather than a city, but finding the state is hard enough, even for Australians. No one can actually work out where Dwayne actually lives. If you enjoyed this episode or think it might get better, why not subscribe and share it with a friend? And join us next time with episode 1, The Way Back.